Hello, I'm Mark Schildhouse, and because things on the internet seem to lose their date references pretty easily, today is Monday, October 14th, 2024. On Friday, September 13th, 2024, we visited the Don Garlits Museum of Drag Racing in Ocala, Florida. And we're on our long vacation, and I'm going to cut this short. This was a fantastic museum, free parking, easy access, beautifully maintained buildings, beautifully maintained grounds, beautifully maintained cars and vehicles and numerous other things. And this is going to be a long video, so I'm going to cut this short, other than saying parking is free, admission is very reasonable, and the presentation is fantastic. So thanks to Don Garlits and the crew that put this together. Let's get on with the video. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you in another one. We were using both our Garmin GPS and Google Maps to get to the Don Garlits Museum of Drag Racing, and both of them led us to the free parking, very well identified area to enter the museum, and we had no real problems in getting there. And there are some nice things looking there. An A7 because of his work with the Navy Recruiting Command, and then this other Texaco sign and car parked out in the yard. The Swamp Rats cars are pretty much numbered 1 through 30 something, and we're going to stroll through them here. I'm going to just point out some highlights as we go along, so you may have to back up or whatever as we go. And a fair amount of these are actually reconstructions of the vehicles that they were, but they're built by Don Garlits and other people helping them do that, so they're extremely accurate representations. The fun, they're all fun, and I'm just kind of rambling as we go. That very first one that we showed was actually two. If you look at it, it's a mix of parts and 2 sets of T-rails, and I'm just reading the thing. It's well past yours, put all together to make this whole thing work, and that was the one that started it all. This particular car engine, correctly, is a Buick Nailhead V8. Now, I'd never heard the phrase before. I've worked on a lot of engines, but I'd never heard the phrase before. And if you look at it, you'll see that the valves, it's an overhead valve engine, and the valves are vertical on the heads. So it's not in the typical V you see in the 265s. The valves are vertical on this thing, hence Nailhead. As we ramble through these, you're going to see a number of engines come and go, and the Ford flathead V8s, which were really popular drag racing engines, started literally the day they came out, and then into the 40s and 50s, 60s, and probably still see them around. I haven't been to a drag strip in quite a while. Then you'll see the standard V8s, the Chevys and the Fords in these cars, and then you'll see the Chrysler Hemis start coming up. And as the narratives in the signage shows, Don Garlits got picked up, and I'll use the phrase picked up, by Chrysler Corporation when he was running, I believe it was a Chevy engine, and they started augmenting him with the Dodge, in particular by brand, Hemi engine, and that's what took it to the highest speed possible. Even with the few typos in the signage, the few annoyances in the signage at the museum is really interesting, because it tells you the history of the cars, which evolved as you're watching this, from modified cars to what I know as rails, slingshot dragsters, to body dragsters, to funny cars, to jet cars, to electric cars, which was really cool. The Museum of Drag Racing, like most museums, has a lot of history in it, and one of those history events is caused by a guy who made a lot of history in the process of drag racing, changing the rules, changing the design, changing the safety, whatever else. And there's a really, really good video on YouTube, 52 minutes long, about some of the events of Don Garlits and some of his life attitudes. And I will tell you, I met him twice, once at a drag strip, once at an auto show, US 30 drag strip, and at the Chicago Auto Show in the amphitheater. And I was totally impressed meeting him, and you got to go to YouTube and watch the video. So accidents make history, and accidents make changes in rules. And my next door neighbor when I was growing up, Joe Gangoff, was part of a racing team that raced a classic rail, front engine, Hemi powered rail with a supercharger on top of it, and it was impressive. And I got to help him every once in a while and go to the track. And somewhere along the line, that's where I met Don Garlits one time. Happened to have met him in the pit area, and just because he was literally the icon of racing at that time, the memory just stayed with me the entire time. Then saw him in the auto show several years later, and went over and met him, and it was an absolutely super meeting. While we were dating, I took my wife to US 30 drag strip in northern Indiana, suburb of, it's one of the Chicago area drag strips. It's maybe 20-30 miles from Chicago. And we, on the first date, I had pit passes, and literally walked into the pits and tried to talk to people, and if I said hello, I got a hi back, and that was it. They're doing things, and I understand that, but it just kind of annoys me that when you ask a question, the guy just kind of waves you away. That's not the way to do it, in my opinion. And on the and we left that day with sunburns and headaches, because it was loud, and at that time we didn't use hearing protection like we would now. Later on, we would go out a second time. I didn't buy the pit passes. We sat on the north side of the strip, as I remember it, and in one of the AA fuelers coming up to the line, lights turn green, the cars blast off, literally right in front of us. The guy blows an engine, and it's the time frame before blankets and containment belts and whatever else. And there was a couple of people in the stands near us, fairly close, that received some minor injuries, and a piece of the engine is actually blown over the grandstands into the parking lot behind us to damage a car. And we left that day with sunburns and headaches too. As we roll through this, you're going to see some pretty interesting cars, a lot of Don Garlits cars, or the recreations of his cars, and other main name drivers and car teams as we go. And it's just a museum of fantastic history, fantastic presentation, really good stories on the signage, which you can pause the video, as most people know, to read the individual signage, and I've tried to increase the signage so that you can read it in most cases. Unfortunately, the thing I wish museums would figure out how to do is to stop the glare off their signs. Non-reflective signs, that would be my desire. And if I have some of the cars misidentified, sorry about that. So as you're reading Swap Rat 31, towards the end of the strip, the quarter mile, the car flipped over backwards, and it went through the traps upside down and backwards, and it had a speed of 215 miles an hour. That's because generally the speed for the race is recorded in the last 66 feet of the race. The elapsed time is usually from the time you break the beam on the start to the time you break the beam at the end of the quarter mile. So you can have a really fast ET, 5.51 elapsed time, seconds elapsed time, but because the car was flipped over and backwards and no longer being powered down the track, but now sliding, his speed is only 215. Engines, cars, signage, all that stuff. We're gonna move on from looking at the Swamp Rats stuff to other stuff and another little clip audio. There are some really interesting cars in the Don Garlits Museum of Drag Racing, and you need to stop by. I would recommend probably 4 to 5 hours if you're a sign reader. And here's some more of the Don Garlits directly associated cars, and then we're going to move on to see some other cars from other drivers that in the time I was going to the drag strips, that I was watching the drags, whatever, that names I recognize, names I knew. So here are some gallery shots, I will call them, of the first of the buildings, the race car building. The other one is the classic car building, and we're going to do that a little later in the video. There are a number of race cars of various types in this building that have been donated, loaned, bought, acquired, numerous types. So it really makes it fun and interesting, because no matter what type of racing you're into, you'll probably find it here, except maybe truck racing, NASCAR truck racing. I don't think that's in here, but the rest of it's in here, and it's a wide variety covering a wide span of years and a wide span of technologies. So Monahan, Ferguson, and Jackson and Faust decided that they were going to build a streamlined car, and this is what it looked like. They were after 200 plus in the quarter, and they just missed it. And then, like many things, funding ran out and it's gone. It's a beautiful car. And Lyle Scott's Bustle Bomb, they were running, this is a dual engine car. There's an engine in front, engine in back, so watch it very, very carefully. And this thing ran at 150 miles an hour and broke several records, track records, and whatever else. 2 engines of 2 different types, so it's got an Oldsmobile in the front and a Caddy engine in the back. A term some of us grew up with is rail dragsters. Rail dragsters were open chassis, something to hold the front end and the back end together with an engine somewhere associated with it, and a drivetrain and a driver and steering gear, and as little as possible to put on the car. And this is the vehicle that is responsible for the phrase drag, rail dragster. I'm going to cruise through these and let you just look at them as we go. I'm not going to address every one. However, some of them do take note. Speed Sport, the write-up says it was in Tucson, Arizona, and Chicago, Illinois. And in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken, they were at 111th, about 2800 West, just east of Mount Greenwood, which would put them possibly in Beverly. And it was a speed shop, actually, in the garage facility that Al Rudolph had his dealership in, which is where my dad was. And they had race cars all over the place, so I believe it was the same place. As we move on, there are some other beautiful cars in here, and the write-ups are really good. I like the write-ups. I like the ways the cars were displayed. Other than the fact that they are, I'd like to get around them some more so that I could see whatever. Tom McEwen is one of the names that comes up in Race Car Legend, and he was racing in the time frame that I was following drag racing. Beautiful cars. These cars were works of art, and when they look at the bodies, usually the bodies were fiberglass manufactured to resemble something, because underneath them they had nothing to do with factory built cars. Shirley Muldowney. I'm going to get a little sexist here, I think. I have had numerous careers: naval aviator, commercial pilot, commercial truck driver, college instructor, mechanic, equipment operator, and a number of those fields were quote-unquote co-ed. And I will tell you that women come in the same categories as men: the good, the bad, and the ugly. And Shirley Muldowney was one of the good. And having watched her race on television, watched some of the stuff she had done, she deserves a pat on the back. She proved that there's not a sexist ceiling in this profession. It's the skills of the driver, not the sex of the driver. I left the first frame in here, and then I'm going to get rid of it. This is another Shirley Muldowney car, and John Force, one of the other legends of drag racing currently, his daughter is doing a fantastic job on the track too. This Mustang is one of the Shirley Muldowney raced cars. Don Perdone is one of the numerous legends of drag racing through the years 60s, 70s, 80s, I think, and now he owns a stable. It's here in Southern California, about 30 miles from our house. I believe it's Rancho San Diego, Rancho something or another. And I was working with a guy who was the neighbor of Ron Capps, his driver at the time. So we got invited over to view what's referred to as his stable, and had an interesting meeting with him. Saw some of the current cars and talked to Ron Capps, and kind of enjoyed the interesting interaction. Closing out Don Perdome, the names, nicknames, call signs, whatever you want to call them, that these guys got was interesting. So Swamp Rat, Don Garlits. Now Snakes Eat Rats, and Don Perdone was the snake. And then we had Tom McEwen, who was the mongoose, which kills snakes. And then we have TV Tommy Ivo, which breaks the trend. TV Tommy Ivo was actually a bit character, television actor in a number of different roles along the way. Just kind of fun how they get their names. Green Monster Jet, Art Arfons, he painted his jet green. It was ugly, or it was a monster. One of them was a jet car. Made a lot of noise, made a lot of smoke, didn't go real fast. I'm hoping I have these photos in order. Sometimes I get confused. I try to take the placard, the signage for the car first, and then the car, and it doesn't always work out. Connie Coletta has a interesting history, because in the process of being a drag racer, if folklore is correct, he bought a surplus C-54 to transport his cars from point to point, and he would end up with Kalita Air, which is a military charter operation in particular. I wonder if it's still in operation. I haven't looked it up. We used to see Kalita Air jets coming into the military fields all the time. A number of people ended up with names, and I'm not sure if they were associated with sponsors or not. Tinker Toy, I would assume it had some degree of sponsorship because it's got Tinker Toys on it. It's a beautiful car. It's also a front engine dragster, so it was a slingshot type dragster. Chris Karamazini, the Golden Greek. You get back to those interesting names as to how they came up with them. The Bounty Hunter was earlier, and Chris Karamazini had some beautiful cars. You look at how much metal is in this car, and you wonder how it's going to withstand a run up to 200 plus miles an hour. You're trying to go fast, and wind resistance, air resistance is a factor. So you get people trying to figure out how to reduce the wind frontage, the windage area of what's called the sail, if you're a sailor, of your vehicle. And here's some interesting attempts to do it. AMT, if you look it up on the internet, use AMT models, and it's aluminum model toys, and it was originally intended to be dealer uh, examples of the cars, and I built AMT plastic models, injection molding plastic models. I built hundreds of them. It was really cool. So they had some fantastic cars, and were obviously sponsors of cars. You can see it also on one of the Swamp Rats cars. This Spirit of America Greg Breedlove car is powered by a Hemi. He would also build another Spirit of America using a ex-military jet engine and break the 400-mile-an-hour land speed records. There was issues about what the vehicle qualified as, because it only had 3 wheels instead of 4, because the wheels weren't powered, things like that. But he broke 400 miles an hour, which was record. That vehicle was on display at the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry for a number of years. Now I understand it's down in Indianapolis, Indiana. There continues to be a lot of cars and drivers that some of us know, and not because I stayed current. I did not stay current with drag racing after about 1970-71. Took my wife out to US 30 drag strip a couple of times in northern Indiana, suburb of Chicago, distant suburb of Chicago. But with college, full-time jobs, college, Navy career, and then careers afterwards, I didn't follow drag racing very much. My wife still occasionally turns it on the television, and guys like John Force, who started this clip of the audio, what an appropriate name, because he is a force in drag racing, and his daughter's following it. But other names as we cruise through here, and they'll be passed by the time you hear it, that just came up as you go, and the machines that were being built because people were using a combination of imagination and available parts. So if you could buy an engine, a really big engine that needed work for $50 and invest $200 to get it running, why buy one that was smaller, that was $500, that was quote-unquote a great engine that you could put on and finish the build-up. So you see a lot of those. And saw a couple of the jet cars in the 60s, 70s run at US 30, and they were never impressive. Yeah, they made a lot of noise, made a lot of smoke, but and later on that would change. In my opinion, the jet cars, due to their acceleration, were more appropriate for the Bonneville Salt Flats and speed records over 1 mile with a starting run of, say, 3 to 5 miles. And names that come up as you go through here, and how the technologies change, because I'm not trying to keep them in any specific order. And engines that you hear about in songs, 413s, 427s, 426s, big blocks, whatever. Really cool. This is a fantastic museum for those of us that love the motorsports, in particular drag racing, street racing, hot rods. As you scroll through this engine, this section, you're going to see a number of things pop up, and Art Malone's Sidewinder, which is a 426 Dodge Hemi, mounted transverse, and compressed air was the supercharger. And I don't fully understand how this one was going to work. I wish, let's put it up on a stand and start taking it apart and take a look at it. One of the issues was the Roots type blowers that were commonly used on these, the 671 series that you see on many of these supercharged cars, used a whole lot of power to run your compressing air. Well, you get a return on that when you put it in the cylinders and you put a fuel in it, whether it be gas, nitromethane, or something else. You get a return on that, but you're still giving it up. So how do you get around that? And this was an effort. Art Malone made an effort to change that, and it just didn't work out. But if you don't try, you don't win. and it is repetitive. Sorry about that, but your imagination, technology, your dollars, your access to parts, whatever else, and you just start building. So the rocket cars are interesting. How you're going to power them, how you're going to stop them, how you're going to control them, to what degree you're going to control them. Kind of fun. And the way the museum displays these cars and signs these cars, puts the signage on these cars, is just really cool, and it's something you've got to see. For one, the museum is really, really full. It's packed with cars from a lot of people with a lot of different technologies, and most of the cars have signage that explain their histories and their accomplishments, their successes and their failures, and it's just totally cool. You gotta spend time in the museum, and we had, I think, 3 to 4 hours to be there before we moved on to our next point, and it was rewarding. If you're familiar with Tom and Dick Smothers from the Smothers Brothers shows and their songs and their humor, they have an article in here. I didn't remember seeing a car. And then Smokey Unit comes up, and Smokey wrote articles for, I believe it was Popular Science, about interesting car problems that he had faced and whatever. And there's some interesting history behind Smokey and his claims and whatever else. But part of it was he is one of the maybe he's one of the characters that the movie Cars is based around. The Hudson Hornet, double H power, whatever you want to call it, and several things in the museum based on Smokey. He was quite a character. You can research him on the internet and find out what a character he was. There is an engine room off to the side, and it has a number of absolutely beautifully displayed engines, Hemi small blocks, components of engines, whatever, and cutaways. Absolutely fantastic. Just let you cruise through them. And watching the development of not only the engines over a period of time, but how they were utilized in the cars and transportation, drags, rotor. You see that throughout the museum, and how guys were going to use these things. Really, I'm a mechanical kind of guy. This was just really fun. With this, we're going to end the hot rod, race car, dragster section, and we're going to go over to the classic car section of the museum. We're moving into the second part of the museum, the second building. The second building has classic cars in it, and as with the first building, these cars are in fantastic shape and have great signage, and I'm just gonna kind of let you cruise through some of them. This video would be about 35 hours long if I narrated every frame and every car. I will tell you that we took over 540 pictures at the museum, and we did have obvious issues with the photography because the signage in particular is gloss. It's gloss coated. You can see all the light reflections, the light interference on trying to read these, which is disappointing. But anyways, this is a wide variety of cars, and you're going to see as we scroll through these the differences and as they come along. And it's really neat to pause and read the history of these cars that are donated to the museum by the people who cared enough to donate them. It was really interesting. I could have read literally every sign without moving to the next one until I read it, and that would have made the museum about a 10-day visit. I've tried to group this block of cars in the Classic Car Museum by their manufacturers. They were amply spread out throughout the museum, and there were quite a few of them. When you get to the gallery shots, you'll see that there are a lot of cars in this museum. One of the annoyances is they are literally packed 12 inches, 18 inches apart, and you can't see anything but the front on a fair amount of them. But the signage is good, and they do have interesting histories. This display of Chrysler products, Chryslers, Dodges, Plymouths, shows the wide variety of cars available and on display at the museum. Some of them that you would see as absolute street cars, being bought by mom and dad for the kids to learn to drive in. Some of them being bought by the kids once they were no longer under mom and dad's control, to have fun on the streets or at the drags. I think at US 30 Drag Strip they opened up on Thursday night and Wednesday night and Thursday night for you to tune your car, so to speak, but they also allowed challenge runs at that time where you paid some fee like $5 a run, and you went up to the line with anybody that paid the other $5 or whatever it was, and they did the timing and the lights and the timing in challenge runs, grudge runs, if you want to listen to Dick Dale songs. And anybody against anybody, but the track was open for the more professional drivers to work on their cars and to figure their cars out before the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Friday nights was qualifying, Saturday was additional qualifying, Sundays was the finals. On the Bearcat Camaro, you have to read the very bottom of the signage, and I'll put it in again at the end of this block so you can look at it. But it demonstrates what the quarter-mile drag was against something like the Bonneville Salt Flats. The Bonneville Salt Flats had a run-up area, then they had a measured mile that they timed you in, and then they had a coast-down area, and then you had to turn around and do the same measured mile going the opposite direction. It was the average of those two runs, one going west, one going east, or whatever directions they were. That was your quote-unquote official run, and that took into compensation for winds and everything else, and you had to do that within an hour. So this particular Bearcat Camaro through the quarter mile did one speed of 125 miles an hour in the quarter, but out on a given straight run its top end was 220, so it could accelerate in a quarter mile to 125, and if you let it continue to run, it'd gain another almost 100 miles. Some history of Buick and where and how Buick came from. And 1909, 1910, it was one of the largest, if not the largest, car manufacturer in the United States, and it would continue. And this run of cars shows the change in styles and technologies as we go, including, and it brings in some foreign cars along the way. A friend of ours up in Chicago when I was growing up had a Crosley, and they absolutely loved it. My dad thought it was just a little bit too small for a family, but as I recall, the couple that owned it had no children, so it was perfect for them. Interesting cars, interesting car names, interesting car histories, variety of cars, the history of those cars, and as you scroll through this, the Orient buckboard has got to be one of my favorites, and maybe someday I might just decide to try to duplicate this in my workshop. Not so much duplicate it as use it as a guide to making a car of my own, even if I can't operate it on the street. I'm not sure what, if you homemade a car, what requirements would be to operate it on the road today. I know that in the 1960s it required some of the safety stuff. I wonder if it would require the pollution control stuff and whatever else that would be required in a factory produced car today. Would be an interesting question. Most states actually have standards to manufacturers of cars that are in compliance with the federal government. And another name I've never heard before is the Metz car, and you can read the signage. Evidently this was a kit car, and there were a number of kits for various things. And moving on to into the Studebaker series, a friend of ours had Studebakers. My dad loved them, thought they were great cars. Moving off into the Willys and just moving through this. Loved the lawnmower that was built for Don to do a Citgo commercial. I'm not sure how it would handle the lawn, but it would have been interesting to watch. While we were in the museum, in my Canon digital camera, I had consumed one entire battery and took it down to the red warning advisory that I was running out of power, and used the second battery to the point that I was on the edge of getting that red light again. It gives you some signals. And so we're going to move off into some of the gallery shots that I took in dying days of the second battery. How many photos did I take? Over 540, I believe, and there were issues with the photos, obviously. So here's some gallery shots, some random shots of what you can see at the Don Garlits Museum of Drag Racing, which is a fantastic museum to visit if you're into mechanical, if you're into racing, if you're into cars, if you're into history, whatever. It was an absolute positive super visit, and I would love to go back. It's just a little bit of a drive away, 3 days due east of my house in SoCal. There is a lot to Don Garlits Museum of Drag Racing. It's more than drag racing, as you can see through these what I'm going to call gallery shots of the Classic Car Museum. And I'm running out of time with the I'm not sure what my time limit is on YouTube, but this has got to be pushing it. So building this in sections to make easier production. This is a fantastic museum. The cars are very, very well presented, maintained, restored, positioned. The ones that are replicas, duplicates, restructures, they're all identified that way. And the history on the cars is interesting to read. And it's just an issue that I have with the vast majority of museums. I wish their signage wasn't gloss coated. As you scan through this, you'll see the reflections from the well-lit museum, and as you're looking at the gallery, this is a well-built structure. It's preserved, it's clean, it's orderly. I just wish we could see more of the cars. I actually hope, if you're in the area of Ocala, I believe is how it's pronounced, Ocala, Florida, Ocala, that you plan to stop by and see this museum, because it is awesome. And we spent several hours, 3-4 hours there, and if I were to go back, I would probably spend at least 3 or 4 more hours. I'd probably schedule the entire day to be there. It was fantastic, and you have to thank Don Garlits, who I've met twice, a true gentleman, and for doing this and for having this available. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you stop by and see his museum.